Welcome to the CSM podcast with David Nichtern. Creativity, spirituality, and making a buck. Blending spiritual and temporal realities, joining heaven and earth. We will be talking with a variety of manifestors, individuals who have, in one way or another, clarified their vision, created an offering, and brought that offering to the marketplace. Let's see what we can learn from them as we each move forward towards solving our own life puzzle, facing the challenge of living in the spirit, in the body, in the world, in this time. If you're interested in supporting the CSM podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/David.
Today to the podcast, we're going to welcome Alberto Villoldo, who is the founder of the world-renowned Four Winds Society and the Light Body School. In his teachings and writings, he shares the experience of infinity and its ability to heal and transform us, free us from the temporal chains that keep us fettered to illness, old age, and disease. Alberto is the author of numerous best-selling books, several which are available in many languages. Power Up Your Brain, The Neuroscience of Enlightenment with David Perlmutter, Shaman, Healer, Sage, The Four Insights, Mending the Past and Healing the Future with Soul Retrieval, Illumination, The Shaman's Way of Healing, Courageous Dreaming, How Shamans Dream the World into Being, Four Winds, The Shaman's Odyssey into the Amazon with Eric Jenderson, Dance of the Four Winds, etc., etc., etc. So many books. Alberto has become a friend of ours with his wife Marcella, and we've taught together and studied with each other. I consider Alberto an important teacher within the sort of multinational Mahasangha, as I call it, the global community of people who are exploring the connection between wisdom traditions and contemporary modalities. I would say Alberto is an absolute thought leader in that area. So, Alberto, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you, David. Good to be with you.
You know, in the conversations we've had over the years, I feel like we could go anywhere. So it's interesting that you just going on the first thought, best thought engine, you were just mentioning that the shamanic wisdom sustained the healing practices, but maybe parts of the wisdom or more, intellectual part of the tradition is lost. So that's how we started off today. I wouldn't mind starting right there. That's an interesting point you're making there.
Yeah, sure. Happy to go there. What happened in the Americas is similar to what happened in Tibet. The Chinese went into Tibet a little bit more than 50 years ago and destroyed temples and monasteries and persecuted and jailed and beat up and killed many of the monks and spiritual teachers. The teachings survived because they were in books and they were in the hands of living scholars. But the same kind of conquest happened in the Americas, but 500 years ago. And since there was no body of writing in the Americas, the wisdom teachings really began to disappear. And what remained were the healing practices and the bone setters and the midwives and the herbalists, because the conquistadors got sick and they had babies and they needed bone set. But the wisdom teachings, which were really in conflict with the Christian teachings, with the Catholic teachings about the nature of infinity, those were almost persecuted into extinction.
Wow. What a loss. Is there a way to retrieve it and to reconnect with that somehow?
Absolutely. There is a way to retrieve these teachings because they're founded on a direct connection with wisdom and not a direct connection with the teacher. So the notion in the shamanic practices is that wisdom, Sophia, is the basic fabric of the universe. And it is your access, your connection to it, your openness to receive it, and kind of emptying your vessel so that you can fill it with this underlying nature of the cosmos, which is based on the cosmos being cognizant. being alive and aware, and not being a dead cosmos, which is what science tells us we live in.
Yeah. So why does science make that assumption?
Science believes we live in a dead universe because it thinks that the only living beings are those that can grow or crawl or creep or eat each other. So it has a very narrow definition of life and of consciousness being coupled to the life forms that we're familiar with. But for the shaman, most of the interesting stuff that's going on is happening in the invisible world, not the visible world. And consciousness permeates that invisible world without needing to have a vessel or a vehicle to carry it, or a brain to carry it.
So when we talk about a seer, is that somebody who can see the invisible world the way most people can see the visible world?
The seers were the shamans that were able to understand the nature of the invisible world and were able to interact with it. Not only explain it, but interact with it. So in physics, for example, we know that 96% of the universe is invisible. It's what we call dark matter and dark energy. But we don't know how to interact with it. We can describe it because we see that light from distant galaxies bends around these invisible clusters of mass and energy. But it's only indirectly that we can identify the presence of dark energy and dark matter. But the shaman is able to not only identify the invisible world, but interact with it because she has access to the field, to the quantum field that is the soup in which all of this expresses itself and from which all of this emerges.
So, Alberto, what do you see when you look at a person? Literally, what do you see?
Well, when I was a young man, I would see if she was married or single. And then as I grew a little bit older, I would see the carefully sculpted face that they presented to the world and understanding that there was a little bit more behind it. And I see the same thing that everybody else sees until I shift to the shaman's way of seeing. And it's a way of perceiving, not of seeing through the eyes, but of multi-sensory perception that you find musicians have it. For example, they can see geese flying at a distance, and they can imagine the flapping of the wings. It's called synesthesia in psychology. So you can cross over senses. Scientists, many of them have this quality where they can use their imagination to perform thought experiments where they integrate reality into it without having to carry it out in a computer or in the real world. Einstein was renowned for his thought experiments.
So synesthesia is an interesting phenomenon. I had a student once at a workshop, and she came up after the class and said that she had acute synesthesia, but for her it was challenging because she literally couldn't separate out her sense perceptions.
Oh yeah.
You know that condition as a medical condition?
Yeah. That what happens is here is a shamanic quality that is turned into a pathology in the West because we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to focus it, how to turn it on or off. So I was being interviewed one time for Spanish television. And this was in the old days when you could be in an airline lounge and people were smoking in the lounges. And the television crew was there. We met at the American Airlines lounge, and they asked me that question, what do I see? And I said, well, when I enter into the shaman scene, I can hold my energy field even over someone, and they can see and perceive the same things that I perceive. And I did that with the interviewer. I held her in my field, and we looked at a woman who was sitting in the bar, drinking a martini, with an empty glass already in front of her at 11 o'clock in the morning and chain smoking cigarettes. And the woman says, wow, there's this white, filmy, milky substance above her. What is that? And I said, that is her energy body. It knows that she's close to dying, and it's already beginning to depart, to test the departure, the exit strategy. And the woman asked me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go to the front desk to find out what flight she's on to make sure I'm not in the same flight. So you don't intervene or interfere with what you perceive. And that's really requires a curtailing of a response system that we have, that we see something and we want to fix it.
Yeah.
And for the shaman to awaken her ability to see, she has to be willing to witness without needing to do.
Is there any sense, though, of auspiciousness when you do see somebody or something and they come into your purview, that there's some basis for a karmic connection there to explore it? Or would you just absolutely just go, no, even if I'm bumping into this person, I don't meddle with it?
Yeah, we even, especially when you exercise shamanic seeing and you perceive a karmic connection, a past life connection, or somebody who reminds you of one of your own stories in this life, then at that point you want to truly practice witnessing, not engaging, because we will engage emotionally. That person that you fall in love with, that you feel really gets you and sees you for who you are, and you feel like you've known each other forever. Well, you have, because you killed her or him or tortured him 2,000 years ago, and you gazed into each other's eyes deeply as you were bleeding to death. So at that point, you want to make sure you don't end up marrying this person in this life or working for them. So you really need to witness, find out what the story is about, and try to heal the story within you and not with them again, because that is just going to create more karma.
So it sounds like a very lonely, Trungpa Rinpoche used to talk about aloneness as a sort of fundamental quality of really digging deep into practice. And even some poems about that. Is it lonely to be a shaman?
It's terribly lonely. And beautifully lonely. But then you're making sure that you don't spend time with the people that you share your closest beliefs with, but you get to spend time with people that don't agree with you, because we end up seeking the company of others that are convinced of the same worldview that we have, that are all living in the same cultural trance bubble where we don't get to learn about ourselves. So we don't try to kill the loneliness with the circle of friends that revolves around basically dulling your experience of reality.
So the shaman likes to keep the edge of the experience, the sharpness of the experience.
Yeah, you want to keep an edge, and you want to at the same time be of service in the world. The shaman's path is one of being of service. And I know that the Buddhist path is very focused on that also, alleviating suffering. We're kind of more focused on trying to alleviate stupidity or ignorance.
It doesn't seem that alleviatable these days. You got a big job ahead of you.
It's totally rampant. But when you are in service and it's not motivated by your deep need to fix something that you perceive is wrong, but simply being in service, so you're not trying to heal yourself through your lover or through your job or through your calling or through what you feel you need to do for the world, then at that point you are living in right relationship, that in the Andes is called Aini. And that provides you with great abundance in your life.
Great word. What language is that?
Aini is a Quechua word.
Okay.
Aini.
There are such great words in different traditions. Like in Japan, they have certain words for honor, for a certain way of certain qualities of integrity. Words that describe emptiness, and sometimes they can't be translated. So if you translated Aini, what would be the closest thing in English to Aini?
It's one of these beautiful words that doesn't exist in the English language because the language reflects your values. So Aini means today for you, tomorrow for me. It means
how beautiful that is. That translates pretty well.
Yeah.
It's very poetic.
It means that for the shaman, there's no difference between being killed by a microbe or being killed by a jaguar. You've got to be an Aini with the microbes and the jaguar, so they're both going to be looking at you as lunch. Whereas for us, the microbe, being killed by a microbe is an illness, and being killed by a jaguar is an accident. But for the shaman, they're a reflection of the quality of your relationship with nature, so that you don't have to kill the bacteria or the parasite or the microbe before it kills you. You've got to come into right relationship with it, and then it will not kill you. The same with the jaguars.
Well, Alberto, how would that relate to like vaccines? Would a shaman not take a vaccine at that point?
Well, the vaccine is designed to create antibodies that will protect you against this enemy that we consider the virus to be an enemy. But if you look at the history of evolution is catalyzed by viruses. So that they're the accelerator. They're like throwing gasoline into the fire of evolution. And it has the effect of culling out the species, of culling the members of the species that are least fit to survive. So what the shaman would do, instead of trying to kill the virus, and you cannot kill the virus because it's not alive. It's from the definition of biology, it's really not living. You cannot kill something that's not living. So to create immunity to this critter, basically, you want to become resilient. You want to strengthen the immune system. You want to become healthy. You want to become strong and fit, and be sure you're not creating a lot of psychosomatic stress and disorder in your life. And then your experience of the virus will be much milder. It will not be killing you. It will actually be helping you to become stronger. And this is the conversation that Louis Pasteur was having with Hahnemann 150 years ago. Hahnemann discovered homeopathy, and Pasteur discovered pasteurization, where you boil your water or your milk to kill the bacteria. And Pasteur was saying, hey, it's the bugs. And Hahnemann was saying, no, it's the terrain. It's the terrain, it's the body. It's the soil. And Pasteur was saying, no, it's the bacteria. We need to develop fertilizers and pesticides and glyphosate that will kill the bacteria. And that was the direction that medicine took. And if you look at medicine, it's amazing how many things are antibiotics, and antihistamine, and antivirals, and today we're discovering that indeed it is the soil, the quality of the soil, that keeps the parasites away from plants. And we find that it's the quality of the body, of the terrain in the body, that makes you resilient. And that's the approach that a shaman would take.
So the shaman would not take the vaccine?
Well, the shaman would take a vaccine as well.
Okay.
But it wouldn't rely on the vaccine to offer you the kind of protection we're hoping that it will do.
Yeah. Understood. So you're saying that the shaman would build up their own immunity across a multiple modalities of strengthening the immune system.
Yeah. The key here is resilience. You don't want to develop a very strong immune response because it turns out that this is what's killing people in this pandemic. It's not the virus. It's the immune system going out of whack, creating a cytokine storm that begins to destroy tissue, organs, and create these long haulers, these individuals that cannot recover from. So you need to go back to the terrain. You need to come into right relationship with the earth, because for the shaman, there's only one illness, and that is disconnection from nature and from your own nature. And only one medication, which is the reconnecting with your own nature and with Mother Nature around us.
That seems like a long road to hoe for the contemporary world that we're living in. Is it possible?
You know, it is essential that we come into a relationship of stewardship with nature as earth keepers, that we become earth keepers, in effect. You know, this is founded in our mythology. We have the only mythology in the planet in which we were cast out of the garden. We were kicked out of the garden, and this voice comes and says to the woman, it says, "Cursed is the earth because of you, woman, and in pain you shall bear children as punishment." And to the man, the voice says, "And you, because you listen to this woman, you will take your fruit from the earth with the sweat of your back, and it will bear, how does it go? It will grow thorns and bitter herbs, so that you're dealing with the thorns." The voice didn't say the earth will provide mangoes and papayas and strawberries for you. He says, no, it will bear thorns and thistles. So we have right in page 1 of our mythology that we come up with a hostile relationship with the feminine, with the earth and with woman. And this is what brings us to a mythology that is predatory, where we look at the earth as if we were deserving. We're the only creatures that own all of the food in the earth is to feed us, and not stewards of the earth, but to be able to use the earth and the creatures to our liking. And that's what's gotten us into the huge trouble we're in today.
Alberto, I just had the feeling I'm speaking to the past and I'm speaking to the future at the same time. You know, there is one version of the future in which people come back around to some kind of appreciation of the principles that you're describing. And there's no doubt at times in the past that people have connected. But the situation now seems so dire, doesn't it?
Yeah, there is a way, and it's not regressive. It's not by, let's go back to the good old days when we rode horses. No, it includes technology. It includes shifting the socioeconomic system so that the few are not living at the expense of the many. It includes a redistribution of wealth in the planet. It includes economics that look at the top line and not the bottom line only.
Thought leaders, you know, and the leaders of the pack, you know, are not really in sync as far as one can tell. So that's something I partly was trained to by the tradition I come from, and particularly Trungpa Rinpoche, the idea of integrating secular and sacred at a whole new level, because there has been, and tell me what you think about this, over thousands of years, people who've been seers and who've been able to talk the way you're talking have traditionally withdrawn from the world, the active and active leadership in the world. And the whole notion of Shambhala, which is part of a kind of a set of, in a sense, revealed, they're called Terma teachings. They're exactly what you said. They come out of the wisdom experience itself. So there's a direct connection to that rather than just hearing it from another living person. That central idea is the integration of the sacred and the secular, so that the image, the kind of iconography of it is the Rigdons, who are actually temporal leaders, but they're enlightened beings. They're seers, they're guides, but they also take the mantle of temporal leadership, running governments, running businesses, and things like that. Is there any parallel there that you could see?
The shamanic traditions are really having a resurgence today. There's a rebirth happening in the world of the ancient shamanic traditions because they're feminine, they're earth-based, and they provide a leadership that includes not only humanity, but nature and all creatures, all beings. So, yes, there is a new leadership that's emerging on the planet that is going to be integrating the secular and the sacred. And that says that the secular has to be in service to the sacred, because the sacred doesn't happen inside the temple. It happens in the fields, it happens in the workplace, it happens when a mother's delivering a child, it happens in the schools. So when you have the sacred becoming institutionalized and happening underneath a roof and inside four walls, it's divorced from the world. So that's to me the pathway that we have towards sanity at this point, is to reinfuse the world with the sacred, because it never left it.
Could you imagine running for mayor of Santiago?
I am the mayor of my local village. The local villagers here where we live, they come to us for advice. Because we have sustainable agriculture, we know a little bit of family therapy, and we have these spiritual leaders that offer wisdom can work together with the political leadership and reunite these two.
Yeah.
But it's a long shot. I don't know. I don't see that happening very quickly in America today.
Oh, it's, I'm sure you're following. For those who don't know, Alberto lives in Chile, where he has a center called Four Winds, which I guess when the time is right, everybody can visit. But meanwhile, there's ways to access Four Winds online. The Four Winds Society. Is that it? TheFourWindsSociety.com?
Yeah, thefourwinds.com.
Oh, just thefourwinds.com.
Yeah, thefourwinds.com. And we operate in the U.S. I live in the U.S. half of the year, and then half of the year in South America, because this is where the traditions, the shamanic traditions are. And we live under the protection of a holy mountain down here, which is the highest mountain in the Americas. It's the Aconcagua, higher than anything in North or South. This is the great repository of the wisdom that in our tradition congregates at the high mountaintop, because it's a mountain tradition. It's not a jungle tradition. That's very different. This is a high mountain tradition that requires pilgrimage and testing and meditating and in cave retreats above the snow line and being tested in nature.
We, in really from the Bunpo tradition, but also Tibetan Buddhism, the notion of La, Nien, and Lu. Have you ever heard about that? La, Nien, and Lu?
No.
So these are conversations when we are able to gather, in real time and real space. There are so many interesting sort of framing devices, or how to experience certain aspects of what we're talking about, that are coming from the Shambhala Terma tradition of Trungpa Rinpoche. But one of them, and these are just woven into the fabric of traditional Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism also, is this idea of La, the kind of three domains of existence. And the La is what you're describing now. It's like the peak of the mountain. In the human being, it's the forehead and the sky. So it's closely associated with vision, with kind of clear seeing, with unobstructed imagination and so forth. And it's kind of the most, I guess you would say, sublime or unfabricated, just like, self-sourcing. And then when it starts to come down, it's called the Nian is the next principle, which is the shoulders and the torso in the body. And in a government structure, it would be the ministers, would be the in a corporate structure, it would be the the different high level operatives. And the Nian's role is to transmit down from the law to beginning the descent to earth level, the sort of practical level. And then the Lu is the domain of the Nagas, for example, are Lu beings. The lower body, the pelvis, the watery, means literally watery domain. And the idea is integrating those three because they're in constant communication. So the retreat up the high mountain peak would be sort of resetting the law, your connection with the heaven. That's another word for it is heaven, joining heaven and earth. So I find this is extremely, as far as I know, as far as I can tell, there are so many parallels like that of joining heaven and earth, connecting those principles. But when the law and the Lu become dissociative, which means you have bad leadership, there's nothing in between connecting them. So people have tremendous imaginations and vision and stuff, but they can't bring it down. They can't realize it. Then you have chaos and disharmony. And one of the things that they say is knowing the placement of objects, even like that flower arrangement you're sitting with has a law quality to it, and that principle is keeping the space lighter, more fresh, more clear-minded, unobstructed by concepts. And is there anything like that? Those three domains in the shaman tradition?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a three-world theory or structure in the shamanic teachings, where you have the lower world, which is the world's beneath the earth. It's where seeds germinate. It's where the ancient wisdom resides. So it's a relationship with time as well. Then we have the middle world. The lower world is associated with the lower regions in the body. It's water by nature and earth. And then we have the middle world, which is this area, this region here, which is where we interact in our day-to-day life. And then there's the upper world, which is the world of our becoming, and which is the head and the more sublime regions of our future existence, of who we're becoming 10,000 years from now. And now at this time, the shamans believe that the worlds have collapsed into each other. So that the gates of hell have been flung open, and all of these demons of the history of humanity and the monsters and the beauty and the wisdom of the ancient wisdom teachings as well, all of it, the wisdom libraries of old, they're all accessible to us today. But the gates of heaven have also been flung open. So we have these immediate contact with very sublime beings and with teachers, and even with who humanity is becoming 10,000 years from today, so that we can throw a grappling hook into the future and allow that to pull us towards a really desirable destiny in a way that was very difficult to do before, because we're not living in a time of crisis. Crisis catalyzes all these processes.
So crisis has a positive dimension to it. Like you said, the virus is accelerating evolution, which is kind of very interesting way of looking at it. And it explains to me why certain people right now, inexplicably, are really thriving creatively. Even despite the level of stress and anxiety about, especially here in the U.S., about what's going to happen next, what kind of lunatic fringe is going to do what next. I know so many people who are just having a kind of real uptick in their practice, their exploration, their curiosity, even their health.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary time if you are able to adapt to it. And this is the challenge today, of course. Now, it's interesting because our DNA biologists say that only 4 to 6% of your DNA is coding. Only that small percentage codes for the proteins that make up who you are as a human. And the other 95% they call junk DNA. And we know that it's not junk, but it's actually a history of all of our encounters with viruses. There are viral snippets of our successful encounter with smallpox and the Black Plague and all of those things that we have acquired immunity for in the millions of years of our evolution, but that have been catalytic. So this is the way that nature has of influencing the traits and the qualities that get expressed. But what's interesting also is that there are 40 million species in the planet. And out of those 40 million, there are only 3 species that don't have death programmed into their DNA. And these are humans, whales, and dolphins, orcas. Everything else in nature, every other species of those 40 million, the minute that the female is no longer reproductively viable, Mother Nature eliminates her. There are no grandmothers in nature. There's no menopause, except among humans. Human grandmothers were the keepers of wisdom. The orca grandmothers teach the young how to hunt, how to speak, how to communicate. These are the 3 species that have the biggest brain to body weight ratio. So that don't have death programmed into their DNA. It's programmed at the cellular level. So when you have a skin cell, for example, that needs to die, skin cells die every 5 or 6 days. Then you have a mechanism called apoptosis that will get rid of that skin cell so the new cell can replace it. At the cellular level is still operant, but not at the systemic level. So we are programmed really for immortality in a way, or for very, very long lives. But it's only these 3 species. And it blew me away when I read this article a couple of years ago, because these are the 3 species that shamans say share the 4th world, that our souls come from the same place. They source from this 4th world. Only these 3 species that are now beginning to source from the 5th world. As we take this evolutionary quantum leap, catalyzed again by climate change and extinction events and viruses, those of us that choose to take that leap will begin to source from the 5th world. But that leap can only be taken spiritually. You cannot tinker with the biology. The spirituality will then inform the field. The consciousness reorganizes the energy field that then reorganizes the body. And voila, out comes the new human. That's Homo luminous.
Alberto, you have a very unique perspective, at least from my point of view. And I just had the strange thought while you're talking, is there anybody on this planet who reminds you of yourself?
Everybody in this planet reminds me, especially you, David. You know, I have friends that are working on how they want to be remembered.
Mm.
And now I also have some friends that are working on how they want to be forgotten.
I was going to say that next.
How they want to become nobody.
Yeah.
But nobody is still somebody.
Mm.
So I think today we have to become everybody.
Mm.
We have to lose this kind of cult of individualism that we have in the West, to put we instead ahead of me.
Yeah. Well, of course, we have a very close mutual friend who actually is partly responsible for us even knowing each other, which is Stefan Rechtschaffen, who is the founder of Omega Institute and Blue Spirit. And I think he's one of my other friends who's on a similar wavelength, I think, with you, which is sort of thinking very, very much at a level of how things connect beyond the obvious level and the totality of the situation. So I imagine you and he would have good conversations. Is that the case?
Yeah. It's exactly the same conversations that we have together.
Yeah, it's funny. And, the me to we thing is something he talks about quite a lot. And I just as a composer, I just shamelessly borrow stuff, so I put that. We're doing the next workshop we're doing with Dharma Moon is on a Tuesday night Dharma gathering is going to be on the paramitas. After we finish this Mahayana section that you and Marcella are joining us for. So the paramitas are the 6 transcendent virtues that take you from me to we, basically. That's exactly what they do. The paramita means crossing the bridge from me to we. And it can't be theoretical, and it can't be idiot compassion, and it can't be kind of codependency. It's this very particular passageway where there's actual recognition of the interdependence. You see it. You have to be able to see it. You can't just talk about it or imagine it. And the first one's generosity. That's the first paramita. Just opening the chest a little bit more, letting it out a little bit more. And, the me to we thing seems to be almost if you want to reduce what we're talking to down to a very small paradigm, it seems to have a lot to do with recognizing the we, and people stop being so damn selfish, all the time, and so paranoid and so fearful about the preservation of that. But that's a big leap. That's a giant leap, isn't it, for most people?
It's a gigantic leap for the Westerner. The transition from me, from I, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? We've become so invested in the payoff of this relationship, this conversation, this friendship, this lover, this business deal, that we forget that it's really a collaborative dance. Darwin introduced the notion that evolution happened as the survival of the fittest, the strongest, an army of one, that you could be so strong and so fast and so muscular and so much teeth that you were unassailable and you could get what you wanted. And today we're discovering that evolution is not about the fittest, but it's the survival of the wisest, not the strongest. And that evolution is collaborative, that it depends on systems and communities and individuals collaborating with each other, with nature, for the well-being of all. And this requires a shift at many, many levels, which have to begin with our mythology. We need a new mythology. Our mythologies are coming from the time when the Earth was still flat, when there was no Hubble Space Telescope, when we lived in a universe. Today we live in a multiverse, and we need a new myth that can guide us forward.
What an amazing idea to, in the title, we have creativity, spirituality, and livelihood. But I think you just cross over into the creativity area there. Who could create such a myth? That would be such an amazing. People do it periodically. Are you a writer? Is this something that you could do?
These myths emerge at critical times in history. So the myths, if you look at the myths of the great Greek myths and the myths before that, they are happening at junctures. And we are one right now. So the myths that survive reflect the qualities of the survivors. And today, to survive, we need generosity, we need collaboration, we need stewardship with nature, and we need to go through the great transformation process, which is really a transfiguration. That little caterpillar that wraps itself up in a cocoon, it's just following an instinct to transform. But then it begins to get really confining. It gets really, really tight. And it feels like something's chest is going to burst open and burst open, and there's a butterfly.
Yeah.
But if you try to tell a caterpillar that's chewing on a leaf that in a few days it's going to fly, it's going to have wings, it's going to be luminous, it's going to be an amazing creature of many colors, it's going to laugh at you. Now, the ones that laugh at you, that don't believe you, remember that only 10% of caterpillars become butterflies. The other 90% become moths that will be eating your sweaters and not sucking at the flowers. And this is that great step that we're invited to take.
But this
And to
idea
go
of
through that-
myth, Alberto, the myth, I'm still stuck there. You left me there because this is what artists do, and for example, you told the story of that caterpillar as a narrative, as a movie, and you didn't give the didactic version of what's happening. You gave just the poetic version of it. And then so many people can plug into that. You're exactly right. There's also, kind of esoteric mythology, and then there's populist mythology. Like I was thinking of Star Wars. That is a contemporary myth. It has technology in it, has warrior principles in it. It has the notion of unseen forces in it. But every kid on the street knows about it, Is there any part of you that is a creator in that way of just of actually just letting your fancy ride out into the form of writing something that is poetic and mythological in the way that you're describing?
If you look at the original authors of Superman, of the myth of Superman, are you familiar with the? Yeah. This is Superman is the superhero that came from, I forget the name of the planet he came from. Krypton, that's right. And his mother and father were Jor-El. And, well, this was developed by a Jewish artist at the time when Jews were being persecuted everywhere, right prior to the war. The culture was being decimated, and it needed a superhero.
Right.
And this is the myth of the superhero that was developed to express itself as Superman, first of all.
Right.
This modest character that was timid, that could transform. This has infused every one of our psychologies: personal development, personal growth, bring out the best in you, bring out your superhuman qualities. And this myth has actually exhausted itself today. You don't want to become a superhuman. How about becoming human?
Yeah.
We want to, and there's a new myth that is emerging that is happening right now. You can feel the pulsation. You can feel the throbbing of this new myth that is ready to emerge. And we hope, and we'll see if it's successful, because you measure the effectiveness of a myth by how it provides a survival and a thriving paradigm for a society or for a subgroup within a society.
It's like a leap into, when in the Buddhist tradition, when certain practitioners like Milarepa, for example, a very famous yogi in Tibetan history, at a certain point, he didn't even speak linearly the way we're speaking now. It was all what's called Doha, Songs of Realization. So there's a book called 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. And he was sitting there practically naked in the Tibetan winter because he had the Tumo practice, the inner heat practice. His mind was as vast as the sky. He was completely enlightened. They said he could fly from one place to another. This is a real historical figure. This is not a myth, actually. But then when people would ask him for teachings, he would just sing. He didn't speak anymore. He would sing, and it was a song of realization. So he would just sort of describe in a poetic. He's like the original kind of cosmic songwriter. And this process of in my little community, Dharma Moon, I'm trying to connect the creatives with the thread of this kind of spiritual narrative and practice, and also with the actually ability to be sustainable. But the creative energy is such an interesting force, and I wondered who could write this myth you're talking about. I'm kind of going to not let you. I'm going to bug you about this.
Well, that's my next book, actually. That's coming out next May.
Okay, you went there.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, yeah. That's why they call me Nudgy Alberto, you know? I never let it go, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I used to have a dog like that too. So once it sunk its teeth into you, there was no escaping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't help it actually. But
So
so there's some element of this in the book that you just finished writing, right? You just finished last week or
yeah,
something.
this is the shamanic wisdom is encapsulated in a fourfold path known as the medicine wheel.
Mm.
And the medicine wheel is actually the 4 steps to becoming a man or a woman of power and of knowledge. And it's a healing map. But after you go through the first round through the medicine wheel, you find that it's really a spiral.
Mm.
And the next one up is a wisdom wheel.
Mm.
And then you've already done your healing. It's not about healing me, but healing us. It's about bringing healing and beauty to the community, to the world. And then it's about the mystery teaching. It's not about discovering who you are, but discovering the great mystery. It's about becoming nobody so you can become everybody. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror and say, I don't know who you are this morning, but I'll brush your teeth anyway. You become the mystery. You don't study the mystery anymore.
Yeah.
And this is in the West, for example, if you wake up one morning not knowing who you are, you need to go into therapy to find out who you are.
Sure.
If this happens in the Himalayas, in a Tibetan community that's Buddhist, you go, congratulations, you have attained.
Well, and then people begin to, from a conventional point of view, behave sometimes in very unorthodox ways, and what I feel like is the creativity then becomes almost a language. In fact, it is a higher form of language. Just express yourself without even knowing why or where or who's it going to, where's it coming from. And I'm just particularly interested in that process, obviously, because it's part of my own process of music and so forth. Is there any aspect of your tradition in which you're just creating just for the pure joy of it? Are you doing cooking? Are you doing flower arranging? Are you painting? Do you play an instrument? Is there any part of you that's just that kind of whimsical part? I don't know that part of you.
Yeah, there is. I think that the creativity is the playful part. And that's the innocent part. It must be innocent. Even in the deepest pain and suffering, it has an authenticity and a rawness that is true. It has a sense of it being truthful and true. And I like to take that approach when I'm writing, particularly. So that I purposely will my sentences tend to be long because I don't want people to grab onto a thought too quickly. But even in the same sentence, I might offer a contradictory perspective that startles you and you go, but it has to be in a way that's not insulting or offensive or assaulting. But have you looked at this side? And so for me, I do it through writing. My wife, for example, she's a writer also and a shaman. She does it through gardening. She's an amazing, she doesn't plant little gardens. She's planted a forest here in our retreat center. We have a shamanic monastery that we live in half of the year in Chile. And so she's created the original forest that was here before it was logged and cut down for farming. So that so this is creativity. I am convinced that if the minute you stop creating, you get sick. And to get healthy, you need to become a creator, a co-creator in some way. And if you look at the Aborigines in Australia, for example, they have creation and creating, but not create poor. so that it's not focused on appeasing or praying to or asking favors of a creator, but on creating and admiring creation. Whereas our mythologies, our religious mythologies, are focused on a creator that just happened to separate itself from the creation, by the way.
Right.
So the spirit is not in matter. Matter is, we know matter is not spiritual. This is, but matter, the word matter comes from the word mater, mother, the feminine is not spiritual. So we need a radical revision of our mythology, and that generally happens when you're confronted with possible extinction. So I am so excited and thrilled about the times that we're living in, because that's exactly where we are. Personal extinction and collective extinction of humanity.
Right.
Hallelujah. Bring it on. Let's take a quantum leap. Let's have the new human emerge. You know, when the Israelites came to the Red Sea, the legends say that the Red Sea did not part until they were up to their noses in the water. It's not like they got there and the Red Sea was already parted, you know, and they didn't put their feet in the water to see how cold the water was. Was there going to be somebody waiting on the other side with a towel?
Well, that's a perfect example of a myth that it actually illuminates a dharmic principle that you have to engage, you have to get into it before you're going to get out of it. And, that's exactly the kind of story that it seems that those really can shift people's perceptions. And we are with the theistic mythology in the West. It's really dominant right now that the notion of the creator being separate from the creation. And then we somehow, our job is to do what we're told, basically, on some level. It creates that kind of almost animal realm mentality of just surrender, but not because there's a sense of connection, just because you feel like otherwise you're going to be punished. God, it's horrible. I mean, there must be a shift. That's one of the things that Trungpa Rinpoche was really tuned into about the theistic foundation of the Western culture. And the other, in the Buddhism, you have the theism and you have the nihilism as the two extremes beliefs that are both counterindicated by any kind of real perception of how things are operating. So you either negate or you confirm, and they ferment off of each other. So this kind of middle way that you're really implying there is just to sort of stay with the process. There seems to be a little tinge of hopefulness. It's interesting in your view. It seems like there's a positive future there. Is that right?
The task of the shaman is to not need a positive outcome to be able to dedicate all of your resources and energy to do what you feel is your calling. So I try not to have a lot of hope, but I am hopeful.
Yeah. Okay.
But I try not to depend on that for the
fuel.
Yeah, that's not the fuel. That's not what keeps me going. A better life, a better, even a better incarnation. That doesn't keep me going. This is the problem that I have with the Buddhist notion of the Buddha fields. It sounds too much like heaven, And the shamans say, hey, we live in a Buddha field. Look, this earth was created by a Buddha or, by a great shaman.
Yeah.
This blue-green planet in the middle of this space that is just barren rock and no life is created by consciousness and is protected by consciousness. And we're part of that system. It's not that we need to connect with nature. We are interdependent. We're a cell in that system. So this is the beauty of having that we're already here.
Well, in Vajrayana Buddhism, that is totally the perspective. It's the proclamation of exactly what you just said. This is it.
Yeah.
This is actually it. You don't get an alternate reality to peel off that somehow is more idealistic or something. So it's all leading that way. Undoing some of the conceptual apparatus, take some serious peeling away. But the ultimate point of view is clearly that this is a fruitional experience already. This is it.
Yeah.
There's and that's, I think, so Buddhism from that perspective is sometimes taken to be nihilistic in the framework that we just said. It's negating, it's cutting away, it's saying it's not this, it's not that. But it's useful. And when we, in our class that we're doing right now, in which you're joining in on, the notion of bliss and emptiness being the couple. Bliss and emptiness, because if you don't understand the emptiness part, then your bliss becomes, as you said, a God realm, Devaloka. And if you don't understand the bliss part, your emptiness becomes nihilistic.
I love the class that we're doing with you. I'm learning so much, as I was mentioning to you, because the shamanic traditions left no body of writing. And last night I had a dream. We're big into dreaming. The dream yoga is really important in the shamanic practice. So I had a dream last night where I was in the holy mountain, and I was saying to the mountain, I hope I have not butchered this shamanic teaching too badly. Please forgive me. And then the mountain kind of spoke to me. I felt these words, and it was saying, no, you did not. And you were not true to the old, but you were not false either to it. So it was saying to me that it was not the same, but not different. Mm-hmm. I go, thank you so much.
Yeah. Didn't give you an out on either side. Right?
Yeah, because
no exit ramp. Yeah.
When you look at the Kabbalist, for example, the whole body of wisdom of the mystical traditions of Judaism come from a book written by Abraham that's 14 pages long. 14 pages. And then a group of scholars wrote the Zohar, which is 20 volumes, 10,000 pages. And then every other rabbi has written a commentary on it. It's kind of the same in a way with Buddhism, because the Buddha left a very small canon, and then all of these different schools and interpretations and Rinpoches and teachers and masters, they come with a re-articulation that is not the same and not different. It's in the moment, and it's I'm very much enjoying being a student of yours, David. It's truly a pleasure.
Well, and I feel the same way, Alberto. I have more time to come to really. I really want to understand more deeply we've shared and we've gone back and forth, and I've taken courses with you and Marcella that have been really highlights, and I feel like just scratched the surface of it. But the commonalities are really intriguing to me, particularly with the more shamanic elements of the Shambhala teaching. And I just hope we can keep having this conversation for a long time.
Absolutely. This will be a running dialogue.
Yeah. And I very much appreciate you joining for our podcast. It's definitely enriching. And I'm also going to just recommend to folks who are interested, and I meet a lot of people who are interested in studying shamanism, that you go to the4winds.com. Alberto's one of the few that I know, anyhow, very authentic bridges between let's say the past and the future, but in terms of being really learned in contemporary, not just spouting stuff about DNA and things like that. He really knows about it. He's got the bridge between the contemporary perspective and the traditional perspective, and he studied with the authentic holders of the tradition. There just aren't that many people like that around. So I'm just going to recommend to everybody who's interested in learning more about it, just go and take one of the courses. Some of our students, by the way, Alberto, are going to take some of your courses. I feel like there's a great flow through there, and that makes me happy. That makes me really happy. So give Marcella a hug for us, will you?
I will. Thank you. Thank you so much, David. Pleasure to be with you. Blessings.